So Joel, let's get right into this. I'm a free agent. George St. Pierre. Well, hold on. Let me explain this to the fans. So George St. Pierre goes on Ariel Helwani's show. And, it's important that the fans understand George is a hard interview to get. When George had world title fights coming up and was in on the pay-per-view, when he had every incentive of the world to talk, you couldn't get him to say anything. George just doesn't love to do media, and he's one of those guys that it worked for. His quietness, the laws of supply and demand. You had this big demand for George. He gave you very little supply. It worked for him. Now, he's Mr. Interview. He's going out on Ariel's show. Ariel could not get George St. Pierre if he had a title fight coming up. All of a sudden, George is going on Ariel, and I'll tie these together for you, but he's going on Ariel's show. He's going on these other shows, and, essentially he's promoting something while he doesn't have anything to sell. He's got no fight. He's got no tickets coming up. He's got no pay-per-view date. So I can't figure out, hey, you're doing all this effort. You're out there working, but you have nothing to sell right now. So he goes on Ariel's show. He declares that he is a free agent. And it just made me think of that Office. I always watch The Office with Brittany. Made me think of The Office when Michael Scott was having money problems. So somebody explained to him what bankruptcy was. So Michael goes and gets everyone's attention in the office, and he says, I declare bankruptcy. And he thought he was off the hook for all of his debts. I had that same feeling when George declared he was a free agent. The same way somebody had to grab Michael and go, hey, that's not how it works. That's actually a legal process, and you'll have to fill out some forms and get a judge to sign off on. I felt that way when George declared he's a free agent. It's like, now, George, you do realize that doesn't make you a free agent. You've either got the paperwork in place or you don't. And certainly, as smart as George is and the right people he's got around him, certainly he does know that. I'm not breaking news right now, but it lends you back to the guy that you couldn't get to do interviews is now doing interviews, and the guy that's one of the smartest guys in the room is now making a ridiculous statement of I'm a free agent when he's not. That's either paperwork that's signed or not. So it makes you wonder, what is George really up to?
So I was at the gym, and I got done. I finished up at the gym. And I got a text, hey, Chael's fighting GSP. And I'm like, what? Okay, what? And I call the guy, and he says that they let GSP go. This was the information I got. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. The UFC's, that doesn't make any sense. You don't let George go. You don't let George go. So then I got to a computer, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, okay, that's not what's going on at all. That's George just talking. Now, So then now let's fast forward, because this is about 24 hours. And so there's a game going on. There's gamemanship going on. So George comes out first, says, I'm a free agent. He knows he's not a free agent. Now the UFC comes out and says, George isn't a free agent. He's under contract. Now George's management comes out and says, hey, we think he's under, that's our position. They have a lot of positions. They can either honor that he's a free agent, or they can offer him a new contract. So now okay, so what's really going on here? What do I believe? I believe George wants to make sure he's the highest paid athlete in the UFC. I think he knows Conor's making more money than him, and if he's going to come back and fight, from George's vantage point, everything that George has done for the company, he wants to be paid more than anybody else. Now, Kevin Iole comes out with a article, and it made sense to me, because this entire time George is saying, hey man, I want to come back and fight. And Dana's like, he's not going to fight. And George is like, I'm going to come back and fight. Nobody's ever walked away from this sport. Nobody has ever walked away from this sport. And George is trying to walk back into the sport. And at every turn, there's Dana, the promoter, saying he's not going to fight. We don't want him to fight. He's not a biggest draw. This, that, and the other. According to George, the information that George came out with. So I mean, my opinion on this is that George wants to fight. I've never seen anybody talk more about fighting and not fight before than what George is doing. So it's interesting, man. It's interesting.
All right, great. But it does come back to my original point that he can't just come out and declare free agency. I am a free agent. Well, says who? Right, it comes back to my point. So George is smart. I'm not breaking news to George. George knows this. George has the right guys around him. So it does lend to the bigger conspiracy, which I love a conspiracy, right? Speculation is more fun than the reality. So let's speculate for a second. What is that son of a bitch really up to? Is he? I'm going to ask Josh Burnett. I'm going to get his opinion on it. I bet Josh has a good take, being the veteran that he is, been there, done that, been behind the scenes, been in front of the cameras. I bet he has a good take. I don't know that I have an in-game what George's answer is, other than what he has succeeded at is keeping his name out there. No matter how good you are at whatever you're good at, use Michael Jordan in basketball. When Michael quit playing basketball, all of a sudden he quit being on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It gets harder and harder to get media when there's no reason to book a guy. When a guy has nothing to sell, no fight coming up, no pay-per-view, nothing to push, it does get hard. And I've seen George navigate these systems. He's on the top of my tongue every week. I talk about George on here every week, and so does Ariel, and so does Joe Rogan. We all fall for it. And I'm sitting back finally and going, this son of a bitch has tricked us. This George, I always see through the smoke, man. I've been to the show. I've seen the strings. You got to be a good worker to fool me. And I think that George worked me. I said that I think he has. I don't think George is planning on fighting anywhere. I really don't. And we can't keep our name out of his mouth, his name out of our mouth, because he keeps going out there saying he wants to fight. I mean, why would I not believe a guy if he says he wants to do something? Why would I not?
That's where I'm at.
Right.
Now,
I'm a free agent.
Now, the interesting part of that, or it's not that interesting, but it is the huge part of it is you know, as a fan, we're like, let's just have him fight whoever he wants. Then you look at the Reebok deal and his sponsorships and navigating that whole storm, and it becomes something that really isn't that interesting to me as a fan. You know, if George says he wants to fight, I want to see George fight. But
sure.
But on the opposite side of that, sooner or later, you've got to go fight.
Did you get robbed this last week?
I did not get robbed.